Someone stole your identity, but it wasn't a hacker, it wasn't a scammer. It was someone you trusted, someone you loved, someone who convinced you that becoming less was the price of keeping them. You're not losing a person when you cut them out. You're reclaiming yourself. Because toxic people don't just drain your energy, they replace you. They rewrite who you are, what you want, what you deserve. They make you believe that their version of you is the real one, the sensitive one, the difficult one, the one who's always overreacting. And little by little, you started performing their script. You stopped saying what you meant. You stopped wanting what you wanted. You stopped being who you were. You dimmed every part of yourself that made them uncomfortable. And now, you're standing in the wreckage of your own life, wondering, how did I get here? The answer is standing right in front of you, and it's time to walk away. Today, we're breaking down exactly what happens when you finally remove toxic people from your life, and I promise you, the third transformation will break you before it frees you, but it's that breaking that creates the space for who you're meant to become. Let's be clear about what toxic actually means, because the internet has weaponized this word to the point where anyone who disagrees with you gets labeled toxic. Someone sets a boundary, toxic. Someone has a bad day, toxic. Someone doesn't text back immediately, toxic. That's not what we're talking about. Toxic people are those who make you feel worse about yourself after every interaction. Not occasionally, not on bad days, every single time. Who violate your boundaries repeatedly, even after you've set them clearly and calmly. Who use guilt, shame, or fear to control your decisions, making you feel like you're abandoning them if you choose yourself. Who refuse accountability and turn everything back on you, twisting your words until you're apologizing for things you didn't even do. Who drain your energy without ever reciprocating support. They're always the victim, never the villain. Who gaslight you into questioning your own reality until you don't trust yourself anymore. These aren't people having a rough week. These aren't people going through a temporary crisis. These are people whose presence in your life actively distorts who you are, and the distortion happens so gradually you don't notice until you're unrecognizable. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Begin each day by telling yourself, 'Today I shall be meeting with interference, ingratitude, insolence, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness.'" He knew toxic people existed. He was the emperor of Rome. He dealt with them constantly, but he also knew, if it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it. And sometimes the truest thing you can do is walk away. Not with fanfare, not with a dramatic exit, just a quiet, firm, permanent removal. So what actually happens when you remove them, when you stop answering their calls, when you stop justifying your boundaries as if they're crimes, when you finally choose yourself over their comfort? 4 things shift, and each one is more transformative than the last. But you have to survive all 4, because the first 3 will make you question everything. And the fourth? The fourth is where you finally understand why it was all worth it. Let's break them down. The first thing that happens when you remove toxic people from your life, your energy returns, and you don't realize how much of yourself you've been giving away until you finally stop bleeding. It's like living with a slow leak in your life force. You adjust to the fatigue, you normalize the exhaustion, and then one day you realize, I haven't felt rested in years. Toxic people are energy vampires. Not in some mystical sense, in a very real, psychological sense. Every interaction with them requires you to manage their emotions, not your own, theirs. You're walking on eggshells, predicting their reactions, preventing their explosions. You've become a hostage negotiator in your own relationship. You're constantly in damage control mode. If I say this, will they get angry? If I don't respond immediately, will they punish me with silence? If I set a boundary, will they make me the villain in front of everyone we know? You're not living your life. You're managing theirs. And they're not even grateful for it. They expect it. Psychology calls this hypervigilance, a state of constant threat assessment. Your nervous system is always on alert because you never know when they'll erupt. One moment, they're fine. The next, you've triggered them by breathing wrong. And hypervigilance is exhausting. It's why you're drained after spending time with them, even if the interaction seemed fine, because your body was in fight or flight the entire time. Your cortisol was spiked, your adrenaline was pumping, you were scanning for threats like a soldier in a war zone, except the war zone is your own life. Think about how you feel after spending time with a toxic person. You're not energized, you're not inspired, you're depleted. You need hours, sometimes days, to recover. You replay the conversation in obsessive detail, analyzing what you said, wondering if you upset them, preparing for the fallout. You check your phone obsessively, waiting for the passive-aggressive follow-up text that reframes the entire interaction as your fault. That's not connection. That's trauma response. That's your nervous system screaming, "Get out." But when you remove them, the hypervigilance fades, slowly at first. You still brace for impact when your phone buzzes. You still rehearse explanations in your head. But gradually, the fog lifts. You stop managing imaginary conflicts. You stop running disaster scenarios before they happen. And suddenly, you have energy for things that actually matter. Your goals, your passions, your peace. You sleep better because you're not running worst-case scenarios at 2 a.m. You think clearer because your mind isn't polluted with their chaos. You laugh easier because you're not monitoring every word for potential offense. And you start to remember what it feels like to just exist, without performance, without defense, without apology. You remember what it's like to be in a room and not calculate escape routes. You remember what it's like to relax without waiting for the other shoe to drop. And here's the part that will shock you. You didn't realize how much space they were taking up until that space is finally empty. You didn't know how heavy the burden was until you set it down. And when you do, you realize, I've been carrying this for years, and nobody ever asked me if I wanted to. But reclaiming your energy is only the first shift. Because once your nervous system calms down, once the static clears, something even more profound happens. Something you've been waiting for without even knowing it. The second thing that happens when you remove toxic people, your identity re-emerges. Because toxic people don't just drain your energy. They colonize your sense of self. They move into your mind like an invasive species and rewrite everything. You start believing their version of you. You're too sensitive. You're too much. You're not enough. You're dramatic. You're selfish for wanting boundaries. You're ungrateful for not accepting whatever scraps of effort they give you. And over time, you internalize it. It becomes your inner voice. You stop trusting your own instincts because they've trained you to doubt yourself. Am I overreacting? Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe I do expect too much. Maybe I'm the problem. You stop expressing your needs because they've punished you for having them. Every time you asked for something, they made you feel like you were asking for the moon. So you learned to need nothing, to want nothing, to be nothing. You become a smaller, quieter, more apologetic version of yourself, not because that's who you are, but because that's who they needed you to be. They needed you small so they could feel big. They needed you confused so they could feel certain. They needed you broken so they could feel whole. And you gave it to them, not because you're weak, but because you loved them. And love, when it's weaponized, is the most destructive force on earth. Epictetus taught, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. Toxic people convince you that you already know who you are, and that person is flawed, broken, wrong. They've given you an identity, and you've accepted it without question. But you don't know yourself through their distorted lens. You know yourself through your own experience, through your values, through your actions when nobody's watching. And when you remove them, that experience finally becomes yours again. Gaslighting doesn't just make you doubt specific events, it makes you doubt your entire perception of reality. Did that actually happen, or am I remembering it wrong? Am I being too sensitive, or is this actually abusive? Maybe I did say that. Maybe I am the problem. Maybe they're right and I'm just too defensive to see it. And when you live in that state long enough, you lose touch with who you are. Because you're too busy questioning whether you have the right to feel what you feel, think what you think, be who you are. But when you remove them from your life, the fog starts to lift. You stop hearing their voice in your head, narrating your every move with criticism. You stop second-guessing every decision, every feeling, every boundary. You stop apologizing for existing in a way that inconveniences them, and slowly, painfully slowly at first, you start to remember who you were before they convinced you that you were the problem. You remember your interests, the things you used to love before they mocked them into silence. You remember your opinions, the beliefs you held before they convinced you they were naive or stupid. You remember your boundaries, the lines you used to draw before they taught you that lines make you difficult. You remember that no is a complete sentence, that you don't owe anyone an explanation for protecting your peace, that your worth isn't determined by how much abuse you can tolerate. And you start showing up as yourself again, not the performance, not the people pleaser, not the version designed to keep the peace at any cost. Just you, raw, real, unapologetic, imperfect, human. And for the first time in years, that feels like enough. No, it feels like everything. But here's where it gets complicated, because the third transformation isn't relief. It's not celebration. It's not freedom. Not yet. It's grief. Deep, complicated, suffocating grief. And most people aren't ready for it. They think removing a toxic person will feel like breaking chains. And it does, eventually. But first, it feels like breaking bones. The third thing that happens when you remove toxic people, you grieve, not for who they were, because who they were hurt you, but for who you hoped they'd become, for the version of them that existed only in your imagination. The version that would finally see you, finally hear you, finally choose you. The version that would wake up one day and say, "I'm sorry, I was wrong. You deserved better. Let me be better." Because when you cut someone out of your life, you're not just losing the person, you're losing the fantasy. The fantasy that they'd change, the fantasy that your love would be enough to fix them, the fantasy that if you just explained yourself one more time in the right words at the right moment, they'd finally understand. And letting go of that fantasy is one of the hardest things you'll ever do, because it means accepting that no amount of love, patience, or sacrifice was ever going to save them. They didn't want to be saved. They wanted a punching bag, and you volunteered. Seneca wrote, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." And grief after removing a toxic person is exactly that, suffering in imagination. You're not grieving the reality of who they were. The reality was abuse, manipulation, control, exhaustion. You're grieving the possibility of who they never became. You're grieving the relationship you deserved but never got. You're mourning the time you'll never get back. The years you spent trying to fix something that was never yours to fix. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss. Mourning someone who's still alive but no longer in your life. It's complicated because the loss is invisible. They're not gone. They're just gone from you. And that distinction makes people question your grief. Why are you so upset? You chose this. You ended it. They're still alive. Get over it. But it's not that simple. You feel guilty for cutting them off. You wonder if you're the bad guy. You miss the good moments, and there were good moments, even though the bad outweighed them 10 to 1. You fear you'll regret this decision. You worry you're being too harsh or unforgiving. Maybe they'll change now that you're gone. Maybe you gave up too soon. Maybe. And society makes it worse. But they're family. You only get one mother, one father, one sibling. Everyone deserves a second chance, and a third, and a 50th. You'll regret this when they're gone. When they're on their deathbed, you'll wish you'd answered that call. So you carry guilt on top of grief, and the weight is unbearable. Here's what nobody tells you. Guilt is a weapon toxic people trained you to carry. They conditioned you from the very beginning to feel responsible for their emotions. Their happiness was your job. Their anger was your fault. Their disappointment was your failure. So when you finally walk away, the guilt feels overwhelming. It feels like proof that you're selfish, that you're cruel, that you're the villain they always said you were. What if they're hurt? Good. They hurt you for years. What if they change and I miss it? Then they'll change for the next person and you'll be free. What if I'm abandoning them when they need me most? You can't save someone who refuses to save themselves. You can't pour from an empty cup, and your cup has been empty for a very long time. But here's the truth you need to hear and accept and tattoo on your soul. You're not responsible for saving someone who refuses to save themselves. You're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. You're not required to sacrifice your peace, your identity, your life to prove you're a good person. And if removing them from your life makes you the villain in their story, so be it. You'd rather be the villain in their story than a ghost in your own. So let yourself grieve. Don't run from it. Don't numb it. Don't pretend you're fine when you're not. Grieve the relationship you wanted but never had. Grieve the version of them you kept hoping would show up. Grieve the years you spent trying to love someone into loving you back. Grieve the time you'll never get back. Grieve the person you became while trying to keep them. But don't mistake grief for regret. Grief means you cared. Grief means you tried. Grief means you're human. Regret means you'd go back. And you wouldn't. Not now, not ever. Because you know the cost. You know what it takes to survive them. And you're done paying. Grief isn't the end. It's the bridge. It's the tunnel you have to walk through to get to the other side. And on the other side of grief is something you haven't felt in years. Something you forgot existed. Something you stopped believing you deserved. The fourth thing that happens when you remove toxic people, you become yourself again. Not the version they needed you to be. Not the version you performed to keep the peace. But the version you were always meant to become, if they hadn't been in the way. The version that was buried under years of people-pleasing, self-doubt, and performing for acceptance. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, confine yourself to the present, because you can't reclaim the past they stole from you. Those years are gone. But you can reclaim the present they no longer control. You can reclaim today. And today is where your life begins again. When you remove a toxic person, they leave behind space. And at first, that space feels empty, lonely, wrong, almost haunted, because you've been conditioned to fill every gap with their needs, their chaos, their demands. You've spent so long managing their emotional weather that you don't know what to do when the storm finally stops. The silence feels unnatural. You keep waiting for the next crisis, the next explosion, the next punishment, but it doesn't come. And slowly you realize, it's over. I'm free. But here's what happens when you don't rush to fill that space. You start hearing your own thoughts again, not their voice, not their criticism, not their version of you. Your actual thoughts, your actual feelings, your actual desires. You start making decisions based on what you want, not what avoids conflict, not what keeps the peace, not what makes them happy, what makes you happy. And that question, what do I want, feels foreign. You haven't asked yourself that in years. You start pursuing interests you abandoned because they mocked them. That hobby they said was a waste of time. You pick it up again. That dream they said was unrealistic. You start researching it. That friend they isolated you from because they were threatened by the connection. You reach out. You apologize for disappearing. You explain, without excusing yourself, that you weren't in a place to maintain relationships. And if they're good people, they understand. And if they don't, that's okay too, because you're done justifying your existence. You start rebuilding relationships you neglected because they monopolized your time. You reconnect with family you pulled away from because maintaining both relationships was impossible. You reach out to friends who gave up on you after you cancelled plans for the 100th time to manage another one of their crises. Some of those people come back, some don't, and you grieve the ones who don't. But you understand, because you disappeared on them, and they don't owe you forgiveness just because you're finally free. You start laughing again, really laughing, not the nervous laugh you used to deflect tension, not the performative laugh you used to show them you weren't upset. Real, deep, belly laughs that make your cheeks hurt. You start feeling again, not the anxiety, guilt, and dread you associated with them, but joy, peace, curiosity, excitement. You start looking forward to things instead of dreading everything. And you realize this is what it feels like to be alive, not surviving, not enduring, not managing, not performing, living, actually living, waking up without dread, going to bed without replaying arguments, existing without calculating every word, every action, every breath to avoid setting off a landmine. You forgot what peace felt like, and now that you remember, you'll never let anyone steal it again. Think about how much time you spent on them, managing their moods, absorbing their negativity, walking on eggshells, defending your boundaries, explaining yourself, justifying your feelings, apologizing for things you didn't do. Now think about what you could do with that time if it was yours again. You could build something, create something, learn something, rest without guilt, laugh without fear, connect with people who actually reciprocate, love people who actually love you back. You could finally focus on becoming who you're capable of being, not who they demanded you stay. There's a concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. It's the idea that after surviving something painful, you don't just return to baseline, you exceed it. You become stronger, wiser, more compassionate, more resilient than you were before the trauma. Not because the trauma was good, trauma is never good, but because you chose to extract meaning from it. You chose to let it change you in ways that serve you, not break you. And removing toxic people is traumatic. Let's not pretend it isn't. It's traumatic to walk away from someone you loved. It's traumatic to accept that love wasn't enough. It's traumatic to grieve someone who's still alive. It's traumatic to rebuild yourself from scratch. But it's also the beginning of your growth, the beginning of your life, the beginning of you becoming someone you're actually proud to be. But here's the final piece most people miss, the piece that determines whether this transformation sticks or whether you end up right back where you started. Because removing them is only half the equation. The other half? That's what determines whether you stay free or repeat the pattern with someone new. Here's the trap, and it's a trap most people fall into without realizing it. Some people remove toxic people only to replace them with new toxic people. Different face, same pattern. They cut out the narcissistic partner, then start dating another narcissist 6 months later. They go no contact with the manipulative parent, then befriend a manipulative coworker. They leave the gaslighting friend group, then join a new one that operates exactly the same way. Why? Because they never addressed why they tolerated toxicity in the first place. They never asked the hard questions. What made me stay so long? Why did I accept treatment I knew was wrong? What part of me believed I deserved that? What wound in me was this person exploiting? And if you don't answer those questions, if you don't do the deep, uncomfortable work of figuring out why you accepted abuse, you'll just find a different version of the same person. Because your nervous system is still wired to recognize toxicity as normal, as home. Epictetus taught, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." You can't control whether toxic people enter your life. They will. They're everywhere, but you can control how quickly you recognize them and how firmly you walk away. You can control whether you give them 1 month or 10 years. You can control whether you let them rewrite your identity or whether you hold on to yourself with both hands and refuse to let go. Psychology calls this repetition compulsion, the unconscious drive to recreate familiar dynamics, even painful ones. If you grew up around toxicity, your nervous system sees it as normal. Chaos feels like home. Drama feels like love. Inconsistency feels like passion. And calm, healthy people feel boring. They feel too stable. They feel like they're not really into you, because they're not creating emotional whiplash. So you're drawn to people who feel familiar, even if familiar means harmful. You're attracted to the red flags because they're painted in the colors of your childhood, and you won't break the cycle until you make the unconscious conscious. Until you sit down with yourself and say, "Why do I keep choosing this? What am I getting from this pattern? What part of me believes this is all I deserve?" So, here's the final shift. Removing toxic people isn't just about who you cut out. It's about who you let in. It's about becoming selective in a way you've never been before. You need standards now. Not walls, not bitterness, not paranoia, but clear, firm, non-negotiable standards that you will not compromise on, no matter how lonely you feel, no matter how much you miss connection, no matter how much they promise to be different. Do they respect my boundaries the first time I set them, or do they test them to see if I'll fold? Do they take accountability when they hurt me, or do they deflect, deny, and turn it back on me? Do I feel better or worse after spending time with them? Do they reciprocate effort, energy, and care? Or do they just take and take and take while I give and give and give? Can I be myself around them? Or do I have to perform, edit, shrink to be acceptable? And if the answer to any of those questions is wrong, you walk away early. Not after 6 months of trying to fix it. Not after a year of hoping they'll change. Early. The moment you see the pattern. The moment you feel that familiar discomfort. The moment your nervous system says, "I've been here before, and I know how it ends," you walk away. Not with drama, not with a monologue explaining everything they did wrong, not with a final confrontation where you hope they'll finally see you, just calmly, quietly, permanently. You stop responding, you stop engaging, you stop explaining, because you've already survived one toxic relationship. You've already clawed your way out of one prison, and you're not doing it again. Not for anyone, not ever. And when you commit to that standard, when you protect your peace like your life depends on it, because it does, you become someone toxic people can't touch. Not because you're cold, not because you're closed off, not because you've built walls so high nobody can reach you, but because you're finally whole. You're no longer a broken person looking for someone to complete you. You're a complete person looking for someone who complements you, and those are two very different things. If you've made it this far, you've done something most people refuse to do. You've looked at the cost of toxic relationships without flinching. You've stared into the mirror and asked the hard questions. You've stopped making excuses for people who never made room for you. And that takes courage. Real courage, not the kind that looks good on social media, the kind that happens in the dark when nobody's watching, when you're sobbing on the bathroom floor and choosing yourself anyway. Here's what happens when you remove toxic people from your life. Your energy returns, and you invest it in yourself instead of pouring it into a black hole. Your identity re-emerges, and you stop performing for an audience that will never applaud. You grieve the person you hoped they'd be, and then you let it go, because hope without evidence is just suffering in disguise. And you become yourself again, stronger, clearer, freer, more compassionate, more boundaried than you've ever been. But most importantly, you stop accepting toxicity as the price of connection. You stop believing that love means suffering. You stop confusing chaos with passion and abuse with care, because the Stoics understood something modern culture has forgotten. Not all relationships are worth keeping. Some people are in your life to teach you what you will no longer tolerate, and once you learn that lesson, your job is to thank them for the education and walk away. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly." He knew toxic people existed. He was the most powerful man in the world, and he still dealt with them daily. But he also knew, I have the power to avoid being infected by their toxicity. And that power is choice. The choice to walk away. The choice to protect your peace. The choice to become who you're meant to be, even if it means becoming it alone for a while. Especially if it means becoming it alone for a while. So remove them. Not with anger. Anger keeps you connected to them. Not with bitterness. Bitterness gives them space in your head rent-free. But with clarity, with conviction, with the calm, unshakable certainty that you deserve better. Because you're not losing a person. You're finding yourself. And once you find yourself, you realize something that changes everything. You were never the problem. You were just surrounded by people who needed you to think you were. Here's your challenge, and I want you to actually do this, not just nod along and forget it. Make a list. Physically write it down. Who in your life makes you feel smaller, not stronger? Who leaves you drained instead of energized? Who violates your boundaries and makes you feel guilty for having them? Who takes and takes but never gives back? Who makes you question your reality, your worth, your sanity? Write their names down, all of them, even the ones you don't want to admit, especially those ones. And then ask yourself, what would my life look like without them in it? Not in a vengeful way, not in a bitter way, but honestly, what would you do with all that time you currently spend managing their emotions? What would you create if you weren't constantly walking on eggshells? Who would you become if you didn't have to shrink to make them comfortable? Sit with those questions, and then make a decision. Not out of revenge, not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect, out of self-love. Out of the radical belief that you deserve relationships that add to your life, not subtract from it. If you're ready to go deeper, I've got 2 videos waiting for you. One breaks down why you can't change people and why you keep trying anyway, even though it's destroying you. The other reveals what happens when you stop being available to everyone who demands your time, your energy, your life force. Both will help you protect the peace you've just reclaimed. Both will help you build the boundaries you should have built years ago. Pick one, watch it next, and keep building the life they tried to steal from you. The life you're finally free to live. And as always, stay stoic, my friend.